G'day everyone, Rossco here, and welcome back to Life on the Hulls. I'm in the factory, busily working around making foam sheet for my internal road partitions. Now, unlike a lot of manufacturers, I will actually laminate it here and then cut it and put it in place rather than actually shape the foam in place. I find that a little bit easier. I can template it pretty quickly and get it in place just as I need it. Now, that's the thing with this whole build, is it's all been built from scratch. I buy the foam sheet, I then laminate it, I put it together. There's no kit here. It's basically a complete fabrication on my own devices, and yeah, that's been pretty taxing, especially over the last couple of months. It's been very, very hot. This week I'm going to be dealing with the windlass section. I'm really trying to get that anchor box squared away before I join the hull on the deck in the next couple of weeks. It's very, very important. I've got Janet up in the other end of the factory up here 2 or 3 days a week, polishing and preparing the molds for our galley and for our sugar scoops and all the internal hatches, and there's a lot of internal lining to be done. So she's busy, I'm busy, let's get into it. Now, my windlass weighs about 40 kilos, and obviously when you're pulling up a chain, you're driving on to the actual anchor chain. You're not just pulling it out of the ground at an angle and putting all that force on the windlass, but there is considerable amount of weight and force pushing down on that windlass. I've actually decided to install the windlass shelf on top of my bulkhead at the fore end of the boat, up in the bow clearly, and what that'll do is actually sit on top for the most part with a couple of gussets in underneath. Now, I've been racking my brain as to what I'm going to do to give myself a substantial enough shelf. I've got a few choices. I can go with 25mm marine ply, sheathed in epoxy and then glassed in and basically tabbed and filleted in the works with some gussets underneath. Or I can go for a hybrid of foam core underneath with marine ply on top. Now, you got to remember, this is a bit of an issue because you got to remember that chain is coming in wet and continually depositing water onto that shelf. So I have to make sure, if I'm going to use any marine ply or any wood in that particular area there, and this is very, very common, I need to make sure that it's totally and utterly waterproof. Now, that means every single hole I drill for the chain to go through needs to be cored and sealed. Every single hole I drill for electrics needs to be cored and sealed with epoxy, and every single bolt holding the windlass in place needs to be cored, drilled, cored, and then re-drilled to make sure that I'm getting that absolute surety of waterproofedness. Now, the first thing I need to do, I've actually cut a 20mm piece of H80 foam, which I have 4 layers. This is 300, 600 double bias, 300, 600 double bias on both sides. That's already an incredibly rigid structure. And then what I'm going to use is a 12mm 7-ply marine ply on the top of this shelf. And the windlass will sit somewhere about here. So it's around about 40 long, so it's only about this long, but it'll sit on here. So with the chain coming up over here towards the center of the boat and a rope capstan on the other side here, I do need to make sure that the chain holes or the chain pipes are fully sealed, so the water is never going to actually penetrate the core of this board. Now, the important thing to remember is that I have the backup should I ever have rotting in here. My shelf underneath will always be sealed because it's foam core, and obviously that is going to, but I'm trying to avoid crushing. Crushing is a big problem. I could put in solid glass on top of this, you know, lay up 10 layers of glass on the foam, but I do think this is a better solution because I'm getting a very, very solid substrate. Solid glass in here would have to be, you know, a centimetre thick to give me the rigidity that I'm already after. So this is what it's going to be. I'm going to epoxy this to this, and then I'll continue back with my other chemistry to hold it in place with some gussets and some supports, and make it a very, very strong windlass. It'll outlive me for sure, and the new owner of the boat once I pass on. Next morning, now in a perfect world, I would have hung around yesterday afternoon after I laid this up. This is my anchor shelf, and my windlass shelf, and I would have green trimmed. Now what green trimming is basically an hour or so after you're set up with a product like polyester or vinyl ester, a lot longer when it comes to epoxy. You then get there and get a Stanley knife and get rid of the excess. I've got other things to do, and in fact yesterday afternoon it was about 42 degrees in here, and I decided that's it, I'm going for a swim. So I went down the beach and had a really nice swim. And I've come back this morning with the consequence of that action is that now I have to grind this off. So I'm going to pull the peel ply off and reveal the laminate. But then I'll have to use my oscillating tool. I'd rather do that than use the grinder because I can contain the dust here in the factory. But I'll trim this off and essentially get it back to the shape that I need for up in the boat. And then I'm going to go up and install it straight away. So pretty happy to get that done. Now, because I'm going to install this almost immediately, I can remove the peel ply because this will be tabbed to the actual the hull and the bulkheads surrounding it, ensuring that I'm getting a really solid join both top and bottom. The actual underside has been sanded and prepared for joining. I'll be basically gluing it to the composite angle and then tabbing the top, and then I'll have to tab underneath it from the front. So it's going to be a little bit of an awkward tabbing process, but once that's done and a couple of support members put on the side, it will be more than adequate for a windlass. That's just it. And that is a perfect laminate. I mean, you look at that, the beauty of peel ply is you can get this incredible surface that is just ready for anything you want to do with it. Alright, I'm going to do a bit of work around my windlass hatch here. I've got to tidy this right up because this all has to be tabbed. Essentially, I've got to get this part, which is an extension in height for the hawse pipe that's going to be in here. This has to be flattened off, and that's the original deck, and then that's the extension part that I'll put in place. So I'll flatten that off so that I can tab that together, and that'll make that all complete. I also need to sand back this composite foam here. The sandwich here, that needs to be cut on a bevel and tied back in as well. I've done a lot of pretty brutal cuts in this area here, and a lot of this work, if I close it down, is going to be a lot harder. So I can actually stand in here at the moment and do this. It's a little bit more comfortable than it will be doing it head first down into a hole. So I may as well do it now before I drop the deck. I'm sort of on a bit of a timeline to get this deck down. With Janet up the back there tabbing in bed bulkheads and bed frames. And I'm actually here trying to sort of consolidate this front area before we drop it down in about 12 days time. So that's it, the countdown is on. So now the hatch is big enough for me to stand in. I can get in and tidy this all up while I've got access to it, really good access. I don't want to be doing this head first down into the hatch like I'll be doing with a lot of the work in these ones. So very important to get this done now. So plenty of cleanup. This is where I've hacked it out, and this is all going to be shaped eventually, but obviously we need to flatten this out. We need to be able to consolidate this into one piece and tidy this right up so we have no sharp edges inside this part. So often, as is the case, a modification will look absolutely horrifying or like a train wreck until you complete it. And this windlass hatch is no exception. You can see here how I've actually had to integrate it into the existing deck. Now, I've actually used laminated foam core to form the box that the actual expanded hatch will sit on. And now what I have to do is make sure that I can actually physically laminate the box to the deck itself. So I need to chop away this foam on a bevel to make sure that I get a good soft angle, particularly because we're going to be putting our hands in there as well, and everything has to be, you know, nicely integrated. This here has now been sanded level. That can now be tabbed all the way across there and basically form one structure, and again on the other side here. And then I've got to make up a piece that's going to fit across here. Now that actually can be done once the deck's been dropped, so that's sort of advantageous that I can still access a lot of this. I can finish this part once the deck has been dropped and physically stand in the windlass area. Well, I can't stand, I'll be standing on the hatch, but in fact I can sit up on the deck and do it. Now just one thing I've noticed is that there's still packing tape in certain areas where I avoided putting composite angle, and if you don't pull that off, you're not going to be able to stick the deck down. It's that simple. So hey guys,
Yeah, we're in Toyama.
Toyama, and what are you building, mate?
I'm building a Dudley Dix design 470, Dix 470, 47-foot catamaran.
Fantastic. And Kev's actually got a factory, so I'm very jealous. But he's got some logistical problems. And watch, have you got a YouTube channel?
Yeah.
Yeah, what's the YouTube channel? No, let's give it a plug.
Salt and Light 470.
Salt and Light
470. Yeah.
470, fantastic. I'm going to put a link to that in this video. Very important. They dropped in there in Australia for a couple of weeks, I guess. Yeah, just having a visit to family, and it's about 30 degrees here. It's pretty hot, isn't it?
It's wonderful, fantastic.
Yeah, he's enjoying it because where Kevin's building this boat, it's what would you say, 4 degrees at the moment?
Well, no, it was 0 degrees when we left.
Yeah, so epoxy doesn't work well in those temperatures, but essentially he's loving the fact that we've got good temperature. I have good temperature all round here. I can do epoxy all year. You're going to battle with the epoxy, I think. That's going to be
my plan is to come back to Australia in winter.
Yeah, winter here. Winter in Jervis Bay is nice. It's cold in the morning, but by lunchtime it's like 20 degrees again. So yeah, so we've had a tour. He's looking there, and I don't know what Meg thinks. I don't know whether Meg will be with Kev at the end of this episode. I might have to check in and see if they're still married. He's got some amazing logistics to deal with at the end, so I'm looking forward to him getting it out of his shed, like we all do. It's a skill, mate.
Yeah.
And you'll lose sleep over it, but you will get it done because you're a doer. Yeah, that's the way. All right, let's go. Right now, it's been a long time coming. I'm going to put this windlass shelf in. You can see here, I've got quite a substantial ledge that it's going to fit on. Now, I've got exposed plywood here, and I've super saturated that with epoxy, with a clear epoxy, and then I've put the thickened epoxy over the top to make sure that I've actually soaked the end grain of all the wood. Now, it's very unlikely that ever get water into this area because of the fact that this shelf is going to be glued down onto the composite angle, and there's only going to be a bolt hole here, a bolt hole here, a bolt hole here, and a bolt hole here, essentially, that will be sealed as well. They're very important to always saturate your end grain. Now I'm going to slather the composite angle with epoxy and sit this thing straight in place. Plenty of epoxy on here, and I've soaked my end grains, very important. All the end grains of the shelf itself are actually epoxy saturated, so there's nothing more I can do than now in place. I'm going to check that it's square and level, which it has to be because it's butted up against that, and then I'm going to do a bit of a clean up underneath, and that looks superb. That looks absolutely superb. And that's actually done now. I'm going to put some screws up through underneath just to hold it in place. Now I could easily get in and tab this now from the top and get the top tabbing done, but I don't really need to because I can actually complete that part once the deck's down, because I can actually get in here, because this actually comes down to here, so I can tie this all to this, which means the deck and the actual the hull are conjoined at this point here, because this is slightly overhanging. This hatch is slightly narrower than this box, but yeah, that's a really good result. I now have to get over there and tab from underneath. Now that's going to be a bit of a job, but I won't be able to do that till at least tomorrow once that epoxy cures, because I don't want to be laying that tabbing over there until the gases are finalised in the curing process of that epoxy. But yeah, plenty of strength here. And this area here is actually going to be a bed head that comes across this way, across here. So this isn't going to interfere, but what I possibly will do is round this so that it just makes a smaller impingement into this cabin. But it really wasn't necessary to solve my windlass issue. And once I get the machine in there, you'll see exactly what I'm talking about access and function. All right, today I'm going to tab in this bulkhead here. This big fella here is going to get tabbed in both sides. 3 layers of 600 double bias on both sides, and it's going to be tricky, and I'm not looking forward to it. But anyway, it's nice and cool, so I'm going to get it done while it's cool, and we'll go from there. Once that's done, I'll be able to start thinking about how I'm going to complete this whole structure in the back here. As you can see, I've got a lot of work to do in fairing and helping along with these modifications that I'm making as I go along, but I'm sort of getting them in line so that when it comes time to do some, you know, nice tidy up and some cosmetics, I'll just hit them all at once. I'm sort of more concentrating on the structure right now. I'll get the structure right, and then we'll concentrate on the cosmetics at the end. Sometimes, just sometimes, I don't film and I cannot be bothered, and it was going to be photos of my butt crack and my gut hanging out probably as I tabbed in this stern bulkhead. Now this one here took a little bit of work. It's 3 layers, 600 double bias, basically a 200mm wide, a 300mm wide, and a 400mm wide tabbing all the way across this bulkhead. Now I've still got a bit of an area here I've got to tidy up. I've got to fill that with foam and then tab across, glue that to the back, and I also have to chamfer this back, bevel it off and tie it to the top. But I've done the hard part. Well, I thought that was the hard part. I've actually been on my knees up in here, which is quite a tight squeeze, and just get up in here, and I've also tabbed the back. Now that looks like a dog's breakfast, but it's actually pretty neat. It's just that the wind was howling. I was trying to settle that pleo ply down, but that also has 3 layers of 600 double bias across there. So just have a look at the strength that we're aiming for here. We've got this bulkhead. These two will be joined together by about tomorrow. We've got this one coming across here. We've also got a 30mm with 1200 quad on each side, wrapped around the back here. So this is an incredibly strong member in an area that is very, very prone in catamarans for cracking, and clearly some major structural problems occur down at this point here. So this bulkhead and this one will be joined. This will all tie together and be tied into the stern transom of the boat there. Plus we've then got it tied into this stern bulkhead that I've put in here. Now this basically is the one in between the rudder, the sugar scoops and the engine room. Same deal on the other side. And then when the deck comes down and joins, it'll be fully glued. All of that floor space there actually gets glued to the deck. Then it'll be tabbed wherever I can reach. Now that'll be pretty much all of it, because I intend to have access hatches in the top of the lounge suite up in there, and access hatches to be able to get in and tab the actual base of the boat to the deck. Same thing all the way around here. So we're going to have pretty much a monocoque structure in this region here when we're finished. But that was an absolute stinker of a job. It's taken me about 4 hours jammed up in there on my knees, and I think that's it for me for today. It's been a big week. Luckily, it's a bit cooler today, but it's been in the 40s this week, and this today is 22, so I'm pretty bloody happy about it being a little bit cooler today. It's been brutal on me, and I had my booster shot a week ago, and that's really knocked me around a little bit again. Don't want to get into the politics of it, but I had it on Saturday, unloaded the container of boats on Monday, and wow, did I feel it. I mean, I must be just getting old. Just take a look at the state of this place. I came up for an hour. I've been here for about 5. Just some days I just don't get the put stuff away. It's just keep going, keep going, keep going. I'll come in tomorrow morning and first thing, clean up. Because this place is like a fair dinkum brothel. It's just absolutely, just distracts me and it doesn't help me get my job done. I love it when it's neat and tidy because I can see what I've got to do and I have a clear mind. I'm a bit like that at home too, so I'm a bit OCD about neatness. And this place drives me to despair when it's in a mess like this. So better get my clean up job. I might get Janet to come and help me clean up. That's a good idea.